Next 4 years, I did 1,200 abortions. Over 100 were the late-term abortions that I talked about. But hey, life's good. Kids are growing. I finally can afford furniture. The practice is growing. Life's going on. All the things that you're looking forward to. And everything was just ducky, I thought, until June 23rd of 1984. June 23rd, 1984 was a Saturday. It was an absolutely beautiful day in Albany. It was sunny. It was warm. I was on call, but it wasn't too busy. I'd made rounds and got to spend the rest of the day with my family. We took the kids to an amusement park that afternoon. Heather was exactly 2 months away from her 6th birthday. Sean was a couple of days away from his 5th birthday. And we went to an amusement park. We had dinner together. And that evening the kids were playing in the backyard, and we had friends coming over for cake and coffee. Our friends arrived. We started talking with them. And at 7:25 that night, we heard the screech of brakes out in front of our house. Kids had gone out on the road. Heather had been hit by a car. This is hard to talk about even after all this time. She was a mess. We went out and did everything we could. I'm a doctor. I'm supposed to be able to save people's lives. My wife was an intensive care nurse. This was our job. This was routine for us. But it made absolutely no difference, and she died in our arms in the back of an ambulance that night. Now, I know you're mostly younger people. There are a few older adults here. But if you have kids, I always tell groups when I speak to them, if you have children, you may think, even if you don't, you may think you have some idea of what that feels like. If you haven't been through this yourself, you have absolutely no idea what this feels like, and I pray to God you never find out. But what do you do after a disaster? You bury your child, you take a couple of weeks off, and then you try to get back in your life. And I don't know how long after it was that I was scheduled to do my first D&E abortion, but I showed up at OR number 9 at Albany Medical Center just like I had over 100 times before. This was nothing, this was routine. Obviously, I had other things on my mind. And the dedicated abortionist I was, I took that sofa clamp and I reached in and I ripped out an arm or a leg, and I just stared at it in the clamp, and I got sick. But you know something? Once you start an abortion, you can't stop. I talked before about stacking up body parts on the side of the table. This is not some gross story to freak people out at the lecture. When you do an abortion, you have to keep inventory. You have to make sure that you get 2 arms, 2 legs, and all the pieces. Because if you don't, your patient's going to come back infected, bleeding, or dead. So I soldiered on and I finished that abortion. And I promise you that everything I'm telling you is firsthand and true. For the first time in my illustrious career, for the first time I really looked at that pile of body parts, that goo on the side of the table. And all of a sudden, I didn't see her wonderful right to choose. And I didn't see what a great doctor I was helping her with her problem. And I didn't even see the $800 cash I just made in 15 minutes. All I could see was somebody's son or daughter. And all of a sudden, this was looking very, very different to me. It occurred to me in that moment, looking at that pile of parts, that this woman had come to me and said, figuratively, never literally, here's $800, kill my baby. And I was the kind of person that would look her right back in the eye and say, why, sure, I'll do that, no problem. Needless to say, we were in a bit of a crisis. I told you that the biggest mistake we ever made was not hashing this out when we first met. And we'd been married over 5 years at that point. And it was a very, very difficult time, because the problem is when you stop talking about one important issue in your relationship, you've learned it's easy to avoid other issues as well. And we've been drifting apart. But now everything got torn wide open. I got into a blame game. I'm feeling bad. So I got into a blame game. It's the girl's fault for getting pregnant. It's the nurse's fault for scheduling the procedure. It's the hospital's fault for allowing them. Of course, and I'm no different than anybody else. It's everybody's fault but mine. And my wife always knew when I had abortions the next day, just from the way I was acting. Well, after a couple of months from this, she'd had it up to there. As I told you, I'm full-blooded Sicilian. She's full-blooded Irish. When we had arguments, trust me, they were cool. All right? But at this point, she'd had it. And unbeknownst to me, she'd already packed a bag, and she was 2 minutes away from walking out. But she was going to have her say. That is my wife. And she did. You stupid idiot. It's not the girl's fault. It's not the hospital's fault. It's not the nurse's fault. It's your fault. You dumb fool. If you feel so bad about this, why don't you just quit? That was the icebreaker. And we ended up talking for an hour and a half about a lot of issues, including the abortion issue. And thankfully, she decided not to walk out. I went to my partners the next day and announced that I would no longer do any late-term second trimester D&E abortions. We used to do them up to 24 weeks. A 24-week baby is, the length of your hand is 20, add another 50%, that's 24. They grow fast at that stage. I said I would no longer do any more of the late-term D&E abortions. It was just too difficult. And my partners understood at first. And I told them, look, I was hard-headed. I was saying, I'm just going to do the little ones we do in the office up to 10 weeks. And for another couple of months, I soldiered on and did those. And I know you look up to physicians. I know a lot of people respect physicians. We're no different than you. It sounds so stupid to sit up here and tell you this. I mean, I'm a professional. I'm a doctor. I'm a lawyer. I do all this stuff, right? Once you've figured out that killing a baby this big for money is wrong, it doesn't take you too long here, not here, to realize that it doesn't matter if the baby is this big or this big or this big or maybe even this big. It's all the same. And it was February 1985. I'm ashamed to say it was that long. I went to my partners a second time and I told them I would no longer do any more abortions. I haven't done one since then, and I never will. But that's what it took for me to personally understand exactly what I was doing.